Racism in the Philippines. Being black in the Philippines. I guess everyone wants to know, as a black man, a black expat living in the Philippines, have I experienced racism? Are there racist people here? And the answer is yes. Before I really dive into that and speak about that, it makes me laugh because I remember before I came, this is my third time here. I've been here almost 2 years. I knew I was going to be here for a while, so before I left, I remember my friend, one of my closest friends, told me. He said, "Be safe. Be careful. Don't get kidnapped out there, right?" And the crazy thing is that I laughed because I was like, we're from South Central LA. He's from another neighborhood that's different from mine. That's like right next to mine, like they're connected, and they can be very problematic areas. And I'm like, we're from America. America's like one of the most violent places on the planet. I'm not, from what I've seen, the Philippines is fairly peaceful, right? So yeah, it just made me laugh that a person would even think that because people preconceived notions or assumptions or whatever. But yeah, so have I experienced racism? And the answer is yes, I have, but not from Filipinos. Not from Filipinos. Filipinos are very nice people, very hardworking, very welcoming, very polite. They have their issues. All people have their issues. There's no perfect people on the planet. But the people I've experienced racism from has been white people, white expats to be exact. Yeah, I've met a lot of expats who do speak and who are friendly, and I've even swapped information with. But from all three trips, let's say if I ran into like, in proximity about 50 different white people, white men mostly, and I've spoken. Just you say hi because you're in a basically what, make sure I pronounce this right, a homogeneous society, which I may be saying it wrong. Everybody looks alike. So if you see someone who's white as a black person, I may assume, I wonder if they're from America, and I want to, I speak to them. I say, hey, how you doing? And let's say out of 50 times that I've done that, I've probably been spoken back to maybe 5 times. They will ignore you. They'll look the other way. And a lot of times I know when they're not going to speak because they may look at me and turn their head. Matter of fact, I remember the last time I renewed my visa, there were like 3 or 4 women from like, I think they were Dutch or something. My wife said she heard they were Dutch or something like that. And my daughter's sitting on my lap and they're walking by, and I'm looking. I looked up at the women because I'm like looking to see if I have to move because how we're sitting is like the chairs, and then across is like a line of like desks you go to speak to people. And I saw the first woman in line. She looked at my daughter and just turned her head. She had like a disgusted look on her face or whatever. I don't know. Maybe she was thinking about something. Maybe I'm thinking about that wrong, but that's the perception I got. So yeah, so just from the my interaction with them, and then on top of that, just things I've seen. I've seen, expat groups where you know they just make racist comments briefly in the news here. Now let me say up front, like maybe this was a harmless incident, but even as a black man, I'm gonna say I think it was stupid in a sense, and the reason I say that is because there were about 20 to 50 black men. They came over here, some type of group or religious group or something. I don't know. They were some area of the Philippines in some type of gated subdivision, but they went out walking together like a bunch of them, right? And people, I guess they scared people by walking and marching, whatever they were doing. I don't know. And what happened is that when you look at the expat groups, which I'll put some in the video, a lot of people went into the groups and they sorry, kids are playing. A lot of people went into the groups and they made comments. They were like just making racist comments because they were black. On top of that, I've seen a lot of different things with people who are married Filipinos. Like this is for some reason, a lot of racists flock here to marry Filipinos. I've met white guys who do speak, and they've been here for like 7, 8 years or whatever, like before Trump was in, and they're basically concerned about what Trump is doing, like in the sense of like, oh man, he's trying to do this or trying to do that, but people are in his way. Like, I don't want to sit here and talk. I do see some things and I do trip up on my acknowledge them, whatever, but I'm not trying to talk to people on the streets and just sit and talk about Trump or praise Trump or demean Trump, whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you should be thinking about that. But yeah, I've seen a lot. Like, a lot of these Filipinos are married to racists. I've heard conversations, and I've been told different things that have happened, and I explained to like my wife or people like, oh, this is why this probably happened or this the meaning, because Filipinos really don't really wouldn't be able to notice racism when they see it, because I think people think racism is branded and used a certain way. So if they do see something, they might not even recognize it. And then honestly, there's the culture here is very non-confrontational, so a lot of people probably wouldn't even want to acknowledge it or even you know admit that something could be a certain way. But yeah, so like I said, I've seen a lot of disrespectful YouTubers. I remember the incident with Vitaly when Vitaly happened. Even in some of those expat groups, they went into the comments and flooded the comments and made it seem like the case against Vitaly was like a indictment on white men in the Philippines. Like, oh, we're gonna have a hard time. Well, dude was just pranking. Like, are you serious? He did some pretty disrespectful things to police and everything. And like, how could you try to defend it, or how could you try to make it racial? But yeah, so anyway, I'm pretty sure a lot of people have seen the viral video of the Chinese woman disrespecting black people in China. And when she got called out, the Chinese government made her apologize. And, her excuse was that she had been brainwashed by an ex-boyfriend. So thinking about that, I think it's a fairly good assumption, thing to assume that there are probably Filipinas here who may not feel the same way, but I think they have a man in her life who's basically doing the same thing as she said her boyfriend did. But don't get me wrong, I think a lot of these women can think for themselves. A lot of them are nice. Now, if you watch any street interviews, when sometimes people go around and ask them, like, white man or black man, which would you prefer? A majority of them say they prefer white people, and because they really don't know any black people. They've never really met any, never really been around any. They don't really know anything about us. But some of them do like us because of our culture. They know about the music and the dancing and the movies. Some people are attracted to black men, but for the most part, they do lean more towards white men, and white people do come here more. So, but just thinking about that and how that lady was being brainwashed, I think it's only fair to assume that yes, it is happening here as well. And that brings me to the point that if a person is confronted with some racism or bias or whatever, instead of getting angry, I think it's better to be able to educate a person more so than get mad and belligerent or wanting to come to blows. Unless it's just something very obvious. Don't get me wrong, I'm with the business. If you want to take it there in certain situations, I'm going to jail. I'm not gonna lie, I'm going. You know what I mean? But yeah, but the thing is that I've seen a lot of people don't even know enough about our own history to even speak. I remember Austin Holloman was speaking about something in South America, and he was like, yeah, I don't want to hear about racism in the U.S. It doesn't exist here. Black people can't even get on TV. They're not even on television or movies. And I've noticed that, especially like in Mexico. That's a good example. But to me, it's more so a thing about, it's not about who's more racist or not racist or whatever. It's more so about our people and what they accomplish. You know what I mean? That's not to say, oh, this place is worse. It's like, no, our people did the work that needed to be done for this to be, for our people to be on TV, for our people to be in music. I mean, there was one point in America when black people had hit songs and they couldn't play those songs on white radio stations. So white people used to take our songs and rework, re-sing them, re-record, and they used to do our music to their audiences. That was a fairly common thing. So the way we got beyond that was by our people doing the work and doing what needed to be done to get past that. But yeah, people should know basic history, so they can't see our contributions and what we have done. Because one thing about it, our contributions are actively being appropriated and stolen. For example, I remember when I was young, when people used to make fun of, the things that are could be associated culturally to us as food. But everybody doesn't agree with and doesn't eat. Like for instance, chitlins. I don't eat chitlins or hog mogs or anything like that. But that still could be considered a black dish. You know what I mean? A part of soul food. And yeah, people used to make fun of our turnip greens and cornbread, hot water corn. Used to make fun of all these things, right? When I was young, and I'll be 49 in a few months. So I grew up in the 80s and 90s. Now, if you let white America tell it, there's no such thing as soul food. Soul food is comfort food or southern food. And people don't even realize this, and that's why people come to the country from the UK or wherever, Jamaica, and they say we don't have a food. They say you all don't have a food, you don't have a culture, because people appropriate and claim our culture and our achievements as well. We know there are a lot of inventions, a lot of things black people done. So that being said, I like to ask people, what do you feel makes America great? What is the reason you want to come to America? What do you like about America? And most people will say, the 14th Amendment is one big one. I mean, a lot of people may not say that, but if we go to Latin America, especially Mexico, that's going to be a big thing for them, the 14th Amendment. Then multicultural society, a lot of people love that because depending on, no matter where you're from, you pretty much have a community, you pretty much have an area, a city or something side of town or this town or that town, a Filipino town or a Nigeria town or somewhere in America. And then it's just the opportunity, school, education, healthcare, everything, all of that. So a lot of people, if you ask them, they will probably say, well, who's responsible for that? And they'll probably say, well, Thomas Jefferson or, Ronald Reagan or, good white politicians, whatever. They'll think that that's what those things come from. So let's start with the first point, multicultural society and the 14th Amendment and the multicultural society. After slavery ended, starting around the 1880s up until like the 1960s, America only let in white immigrants. You had small spats here and there, but for the most part, it was white immigrants. When they got the Statue of Liberty from France, put the inscription on there, give us your tired, your downtrodden, broken, whatever the inscription is, right? That inscription was for Europeans. It was not for Africans. It was not for Mexicans. It was not for Chinese. It was for Italians, Irish, Germans. That's what it was for, because that's all they were letting in the country. As part of the civil rights movement, our people fought for immigration to be opened up. That's part of what they fought for. So the point that America is a multicultural society is a black achievement. It's not something that the country worked for. They claim it, but it's a lie. That's a part of what we fought for. That's a part of what we achieved. You know what I mean? As far as being multicultural. And so they don't even realize we opened up immigration. Now, on another note, a lot of people may not like this. Yes, 14th Amendment was for us, was our achievement, because when they freed our people, at first they wanted to send us back to Africa. And then, some people actually went to Liberia. That's how Liberia came about. That basically was like a black version of what's going on in Israel. Like they just went and just moved people around, put some people in place, and a new government and all that. And you even have some atrocities go with it, just like Israel. But yeah, so people were like, hey, we don't want to go anywhere. Where are we going to go? And which made sense because black people started going to America in the 1600s before there was a country. And a lot of countries in Africa weren't even around back then. Ghana, Nigeria, all this stuff, they weren't even around. These countries were, came about later on. So that's where the 14th Amendment came from. Now, it's an open debate if the 14th Amendment is meant for only for enslaved, descendants of slaves. But I honestly, me personally, I do believe it's only meant for descendants of slaves. I know people may not like that. I'm not trying to criticize anyone, demonize anyone. But when you look at law and you look at the lawmakers' notes, and the lawmakers will tell you why they are passing something, and they'll explain to you how they expect a law to be enacted and how, and so the lawmakers' notes make it pretty clear that they made it for descendants of slaves. And they were trying to frame it a certain way where if another administration or Congress or whatever couldn't come behind them and just take it. That was the point of why they did it. So yeah, and then now when you look at the multicultural, like as far as opening up for immigration, one thing about it, when you look at America, even after slaves were freed, white people didn't just lay down. They try to every left and right. They try to sabotage things. So there were numerous communities, towns, cities, everything where people uh, where people were prosperous. You had a lot of black communities that were prosperous, where people were making money, where where they were very like everybody knows about Black Wall Street, but that's not the only one. There were a lot of them. Seneca Village, that's Central Park, uh, North Nashville. You have uh, areas of LA. You know what I mean? The east side of Central Avenue used to be like a West Coast Harlem. And systematically they destroyed these towns, took these towns, used eminent domain, used freeways, everything. They bombed some, they destroyed some. Lake Lanier, they made lakes. They have, I think, there's probably 3 or 4 lakes in America that were black towns that they just covered up. Part of the civil rights movement, what people don't really know, is that Martin Luther King and all of them were pushing for economic resources, loans, and different things to be put into the black community. I wouldn't consider this reparations. I would consider it more like restitution. And the reason I say that is because they destroyed numerous towns. I mean, you heard about Bruce's Beach in Manhattan Beach, California, and I know there's a hotel that was taken, or is a hotel right now in Santa Monica, that was taken from a black family. So that's one of them. Yeah, so when you look at all of these incidents and how things were taken from us, it's no surprise that as a part of the civil rights bill, they were supposed to give black loans or black investments to communities. There's also an economic speech that Martin Luther King speaks about that they hardly ever show. He just speaks about how white America got so many handouts, like as far as land, how much land they were given, throughout the 20th century, the early part from up to the 60s when he was speaking, and all type of different things, stuff from the Great Depression, different benefits and things they got. So it only makes sense. I mean, even recently, since Trump and them have released the MLK files, and they speak about how he was going to DC to get a lot of money, like some reparations type money or something. It's not surprising that he had plans for that. Uh, but even that shows you the angle that America usually takes. They usually just make him as a peace guy, willing to get sprayed by a hose to get some more freedom. They don't really speak about his economic aspirations for the black community. But yeah, so what happened is that uh, that was part of the civil rights bill. They're supposed to give black loans for the black community. When civil rights passed, they crossed the black community out, and they didn't give out the loans. So at the same time, uh, black people were fighting for immigration. They were trying to get it opened up. You had the Chinese Exclusion Act. They were working with them. So that went through a year later, that ban on the Chinese Exclusion Act and all that. But that next year when it opened up, that's when they started giving loans to immigrants. So basically, people came into the country with no collateral, no owning no land, no real work history, anything, and they were able to get loans to build businesses. But they use redlining, and they say, yeah, you can get a loan to open your dry cleaner or your liquor store, whatever, but you have to do it in these areas, and they used redlining to push them into black communities. So that's how you have all of these businesses in these other communities. And then when you look at the historical aspect of how, I know people don't like it, but drugs were put into the community. That was another thing. That's another conversation. Were put into the community, and those, neighborhoods went down because crack was a bomb in the black community. Now these people who have these businesses in these communities, they have issues with the people in the communities, because now you have people getting high, people stealing, people robbing, all type of stuff. You have crime, murders, everything. So that brings a divide between those people, and then based off the fact that these people uh, do not spend any money in the communities. They don't, support the local little league team or football, or , Pop Warner football or whatever. So yeah, so, yeah, so, so, yeah, so, 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 So yeah, so anyway, like I said, that's why I say immigration was kind of it was used as a tool against us. You know what I mean? Against black people. So these are things people should know, should be able to answer, because as you travel, people may have certain questions or people may have been lied to. But yeah, so we're responsible for the 14th Amendment. We're responsible for immigration, and we're responsible for all the opportunity to go to certain schools, to go to work in certain places, to be able to vote, all of this stuff. All of this stuff. So everything they feel makes America great is a black achievement. And that's a fact. People may not want to admit it. They don't, they want to argue about it. And then you have to look at, like I said, if you are fighting someone and you win something, the person may not just take it and lay down. They may have to pay up, or, for instance, if you go to court, you and someone in your family, let's say a distant relative, are fighting over a car that was left. Let's say it's a classic car or something, and you win in court. And it's been bitter and it's been ugly and it's been a long battle, and he's forced to hand over that car, bring that car to you. He may not deliver that car fully detailed and clean or whatever. You may get that car, it may be mud and all over it and feces on the bumper. It may be McDonald's all in. He just may automatically trash the car. In other words, trying to sabotage you. And that's what, you know, uh, white America has systematically done time and time again, even though we had wins. Look at affirmative action. I mean, there's even studies and things about affirmative action and DEI that uh, says now, like, if a company is supposed to fill their workforce with a certain percentage of black people, instead of like pulling people from the community, who are qualified and who have the skills or whatever, they have been going outside of the country getting Nigerians, getting Jamaicans. That's the thing that a lot of people have been trying to you know guard against, so people don't have those problems. Like, how do we combat this? What do we do in these situations? Because that is a viable question that people had. But yeah, so for my brothers who are running around traveling and going outside the country, who can ask other groups certain questions about black people and our efforts and what we have accomplished, and hey, you should be able to tell them. You know what I mean? If you say America's great, if you say it's the land of opportunity, let them know who are the architects and builders of the opportunity. FBA all day.